Okay, and we're back. Yours truly, Randee Ran here, and we have the distinct pleasure to speak with Dr. Chandra Gill. She's an educator and a motivator, and she's the founder of Black Academically Speaking. How you doing, Dr. Gill?
I'm so grateful. I'm vertical, visible, and valuable today, so I'm wonderful.
Please tell us about Black Academically Speaking, its goals and successes.
Today, I actually want to, give you an idea of what was on my mind today. For everyone who knows Janetta B. Cole, she said something to me that was very profound, and she said, I've met many teachers that could not teach, but I've not met one child that cannot learn.
Good.
And for me, that's the precursor to today when I'm explaining my company, because every day I'm thinking about our children. And for Black Academically Speaking, the question becomes, with that in mind, who's then teaching Black children? But the other question becomes, why are so many Black children learning? Why aren't they learning at a rate that's comparable to excellence? And then the other questions become, why is success color-coded and economically one-sided? So what Black Academically Speaking does is, we're not just interested in talking about the problem, we're interested in solving them. The bottom line is, as Janetta B. Cole suggested, there is a child that cannot learn. They may learn differently, but they can learn. And what we believe is two things most significantly. We believe that motivation and education go hand in hand. And how we do that is we believe in empowering, encouraging, and inspiring our children throughout the nation. We go into schools, we go into churches, we go into conferences, and Black Academically Speaking is positioning itself as an educational consulting company, insisting that our children have a genius attached to not only their history, but to their present. And what's lacking and missing is a belief and a faith in Black children, and we're here to help change that.
A faith in Black children. That I like that. That's that's quite profound. As it, especially in today's time, it is so easy to get wrapped up in the how can I say it? Get wrapped up in the bashing and the
Yes.
yeah, in the bashing of these kids, and not having any faith in them. And it's so easy to get wrapped up into that. And what you're doing there at Black Academically Speaking, it certainly needs all the attention that it can get. And certainly, I'm glad to hear of that work that you're doing. We are in an educational warfare. What can parents do to strengthen their own efforts to ensure their children have a chance at meeting successful outcomes?
Well, and that's a very good question. We make it seem so provocatively difficult, and we reach for these higher heights because we've been so standardized by the standardization of education. But number one, we need to read to our children. We have to. We have to get back to some of the basics.
Yeah.
I believe at the end of the day, some of the basics are what are the important things. I always tell people when I'm in an interview, I meeting you, you meeting me, we both have something in common in just meeting each other. And what is that? We were all taught, we were both taught, and we both have a favorite teacher. We at least have that one teacher who did something for us that changed our lives, right? And
Yes.
so what that teacher had was they cared. They cared. They cared about us. They encouraged us. They inspired us. And so a parent has to be that first child's teacher. And that teacher as a parent, that parent as a teacher, has to read to that child. I mean, let's be honest here. We understand that parental involvement has its greatest aspect, but it also, in a country like today that's killing Black children outside of the school, cannot mean immediately that our children, even coming from a two-parent home, will live to make it to school the next day. Jordan
Hmm.
Davis in the state of Florida was just killed, both parents at home. He was killed at a gas station with his friends, middle-class community, good student, loud music. So what parents are dealing with today is the catastrophic reality of I can have the money, I can have the access, I can have the resource, I can have the education, but I still have to realize that I'm Black. But what we have to do is read to our children. We have to encourage our children. We have to put in them what our parents and grandparents put in us, and they pointed their hand to their finger to their temple and say, "Get this, because can no one take this from you?" What was this? Education. Education has always been our way out. It's always been our way in, and parents have to insist on education from a very contemporary space. Now, end with this answer: from literacy and reading to encouragement and empowerment. The reality is the world is changing. So when we're teaching our children how to get an education, we can't limit it to just schooling alone. That's super significant. But what we do in school, when we're going throughout the country, we're teaching our children, wherever we are, academically speaking, how to create. Don't just buy the video game. Figure out how you can create one. If you can get on the video game and compete in basketball with somebody in Rome, figure out how you can academically match their standards in Rome and create a game that they can play in Rome. So that's the education that we have to consist that our children have, and parents have to be in that vein.
Regarding our youth being killed in the streets at an alarming rate, you mentioned a case there with Jordan a minute ago. Regarding our youth being killed in the streets at an alarming rate, whether it be by the hands of police or by our own hands, who stands to be the leader or leaders that can and will broker peace?
I believe wholeheartedly we have to, unfortunately, we are at a time, as you see and know better than I, where black bodies are even more disposable and blatantly, overtly. The time has come now where there is no North versus South, covert versus overt racism. We are responsible for the building up, the development, and the continued encouragement of our culture and our people. This is an inside-out piece. We need fathers to be fathers, mothers to be mothers, children to be children, families to be families. So again, and it may sound very simple as an academician, I understand I'm supposed to theoretically align and assess, but I believe in some of the basics. We have to give our children the values, the principles that they need as young black children today. We have to almost police ourselves in an area of understanding. If you're on this block, there are certain things that we're not going to tolerate. We're not going to fall victim to the propaganda of black-on-black crime when we know Asians kill Asians and whites kill whites. But what we are going to do is assume serious responsibility for our neighborhoods, for our schools. And again, let's ask the question, if I may, with your question on the table. What is education without excellence? And what is a school's curriculum if it's not teaching courage? What's missing today in our neighborhoods as we're responsible for one another is the courage to stand up to those who are out of alignment with what's great and what's excellent. We have to do that. It's almost like Black Wall Street in 1921. We have to stand up and we have to demand within our own families what excellence is, and not accept mediocrity as the truth and the reality of our situation.
You are certainly preaching to the choir with that one, sister. I love how you put that, policing ourselves and speaking to when we see something wrong, speak to it. That's growing up. I grew up in the South, and certainly when somebody was doing wrong, somebody spoke to that person. They stepped to them and they said, "Hey, man. I don't mean to get your business or anything, but you need to cut that out because of this, that, and the other."
Yes, indeed.
And
Mm-hmm.
we've lost the ability to do that. And I really like how you put that.
We cannot be afraid. And in my work, and by example, if I may, I was just in a school a couple of weeks ago, and one of the students in the school they called him the terrorist, and he, just in label alone, it inspired me. Right? Because I realize that, again, our children can learn. They may learn differently. Who else is coming to the school with some of the realities that they're coming with? And we have to ask real questions. And it has to be predicated upon this fact. Our children do not teach themselves. They do not learn without a teacher. They do not know how to handle themselves. And so if I have a 12-year-old child in a middle school program who's running the classroom, at some point I have to ask myself as an educator, what is really going on in my classroom? There has to be some responsibility. Now, if there's some chemical imbalances in this child, fine. But to the heart of my point, within the scope of my expertise, I asked for the young man, and the young man gave me the flux. Now, don't get me wrong. He told me that he wasn't going to listen to me. He did not want to sit in my life skill class. I gave him the opportunity to at least express himself, and I said, give me 20 minutes. Within 20 minutes, and I kid you not, within 20 minutes, I had this young man's attention. Now, our children are pretty cool, so they have to do the cool thing. But it was interesting because he reluctantly repeated some things that I was asking the young man in the classroom. What that told me was, at the end of it all, if we take responsibility for every child we encounter, and we dare to teach them in a different way, and we lean on what we know works, which is, do we care about the child? Do we believe in the child? Can we give the child the second chance we wish we had and the second and third chance we did receive? Because the truth is, only by our grace did we become what we became. And what's missing today is not just in the classroom. In the society in which we live is a disbelief in black children, and we have to stand up and say it is unacceptable, it's intolerable, and it's something that we're not going to receive as a reality for us.
We are speaking with Dr. Chandra Gill. She's an educator and a motivator, and she is the founder of Black Academically Speaking. And she's kind enough to give us some of her time today. In your opinion, are black people better off educating their own children, given the so many challenges that we already face?
Are you speaking from a homeschool perspective, or are you speaking generally?
Well, it could be a homeschool perspective. I, as one, used to frown on homeschooling, but nowadays I'm kind of coming around to thinking that it could be a good alternative. And certainly, when I ask that question, it means certainly homeschooling, but also say churches get together or community organizations get together, build their own schools, have their own schools. So certainly we have enough teachers and administrators and lawyers and doctors and so forth and so on in the black community. And, to tell you the truth, I think we might fare better if we were to consider, educating our own children. I wanted to get your opinion about that.
I think that is a very layered question, and here's the immediate answer. I think whenever we're taught about who we are and there's value and greatness, that needs to be the truth. And if the reality is we have to create our own schools to receive that truth, then I think we should do that. The reason why it's layered is because what I've understood, and you can speak to this complexity as well as we have this discussion, which is what I prefer. The truth is there are far too many black teachers even who have such nihilism and self-hate that they too are into the reality of believing in their minds that black children can't learn at a rate that's significant. They too are victims of a society that has said you can get a college degree and still not know who Mary Peak is, Mary McLeod Bethune, Sadie P.M. Alexander. That's the tragedy of education in America. The tragedy of education in America is what I just said in an interview last week. I can go through an entire educational process and only know my culture to be deficit of this, while I learn of the white culture to be present with all of what's good. In other words, I lose twice. I lose twice as a black woman. I don't learn the truth about my culture, and then I learn a lie about things. So I have to leverage that. And so for me, I believe that if the reality is in creating a curriculum that will build our children's esteem, because we seem to minus that from what school should be, giving them an identity that's not crisis-centered. And if it comes down to us rolling up our sleeves and doing it, hey, I created Black Academically Speaking with that thought in mind, so we have to do it.
With regards to our children not knowing who they really are, what steps can be taken to start the process of teaching them?
Very good question. We release motivational content every Monday. I've been doing it for 300 Mondays in a row and counting. Teachers are using that in classrooms as we speak. They're getting the motivational content that I send out via my social media handles, Dr. Gill 5, Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook, and on my website, drchandragill.com. What we're doing is we believe that you have to give content that's motivational and educational and empowering. And it has to be culturally relevant. How does George Washington Carver impact me today? You have those who will say, come on, we need to get away from that. And only black folks do that. Jews are not saying the Holocaust is, we need to get away from that. And they're far newer in their truth than we are. Our history has a longer history of dreadfulness here in America. So what we have to do is we have to creatively come up with pedagogies and pedagogical approaches that reach them, that teach them. And what we're doing is just that. The other thing that we're doing is when we're going into classrooms, when we're going into schools and assemblies and administrators are bringing us in, we're finding creative measures to reach them in an area of why is this education important? Why is it important to get out of the line buying the Jordans and to get in the line and learn about stock that is relating to Nike? When you ask the provocative question, we'll find that our children have a lot more in them, but they're in places that we call schools that allow them to matriculate in a very miseducated way, and we're debunking that. We're educating them and saying, hey, back to George Washington Carver. If he could take a peanut, a soybean, and a sweet potato and create 300 or 400 things, he create nothing with Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Something is wrong in this picture. And when we ask those questions, we find that our children begin to think, which is where I end and hang my hat on with what we're doing. How can we, which is what we challenge ourselves with every day, and I as an educator do, how do we provoke hope, number one? Number two, teach children how to critically think. It's not enough to pass the ACT with a 22. Can you critically think about your life in a way that you will ask the right questions with you as a black man, you as a black woman, and find answers and solutions back to the Stephen Bikos of the world and the Mark Delaney? We have to ask critical questions, but we have to be critical thinkers, and that's what we do. We invoke hope, and we inspire our children to be critical thinkers, and on average, that's not what schools are doing today.
In many instances, this epidemic seems like it's an uphill battle that will consume us all if we're not careful. What hope can you offer those of us whom are struggling to make change?
Listen, this is so real to me. I had a student ask me about slavery. He said, you talk all of this stuff. He said, but tell me about slavery. So I went through the piece, and I tried to be as condensed as possible because, as you know, it's the complexities are leveled and layered.
Yep.
And this young man said to me after it was all said and done, he said, I don't believe it happened. I said, well, wait, what do you mean? He said, I don't believe that happened. I said, wow, well, tell me why. Engage in the conversation. He said, I can't believe people would be that evil against us. I said, wow.
Wow.
Now, what that said to me was, and it mirrored a conversation I had with my own cousin, but this young man said, I just can't believe something that wild. And he said, that wild happened. Like, why would they kill us because of how we look? So when you ask the question of what can we do, that's a great starting point, because what we're saying is not just look at slavery from a space of what happened to us, but look at slavery through the lens of how we survived. Now, of course, we can empirically ask the question, how far have we really come? What have we accomplished? We're still in the same boat. And we look at now, they're still gunning us down and shooting us down. But the other side of that side is that we're still here. We're still standing. We have to invoke hope. And if we left the plantations believing in our culture, segregated lunch counters with a different hope in mind, how dare we not think that we can't lead police officers who refuse to accept our greatness and genius? As adults, we're responsible for invoking hope. And if we've made it this far, imagine how much greater we have to go if we would dare to have the courage, the hope, and the encouragement to move beyond our situations. Is it not true that we've always been a brilliant and resilient people? Is
Absolutely.
that not our story?
Yep.
So we have to stay in alignment with that, and we have to speak to ourselves. And I'm a praying woman. We have to keep ourselves at the altar and realizing at the end of the day, we are not our own. We need each other, and there's something greater in us, working in us, that has gotten us to this point, and it is not over yet.
We are speaking with Dr. Chandra Gill. She's an educator and a motivator, as well as the founder of Black Academically Speaking. She's good enough to give us some of her time today, and we certainly appreciate it. Now, I have a belief that our children are lacking when it comes to learning 21st century skill sets. Do you agree? And if so, please elaborate.
This is what I believe, and Dr. Shuja in his work said it best. We have too much schooling, too little education, right? And we make education school. And education isn't school synonymously. School is a place that you're supposed to go to get educated.
Yes.
But today, the catastrophic truth is too many of our children go to school and they're not getting an education. America's problem, because this is not a black person's problem. Let's be clear now. America's behind in the world. We're 24th in math. We're 25th in you see what I'm saying? So what we have to understand is, violence is not a black problem. And it's an American problem. It wasn't a black man that walked into Planned Parenthood, right after Thanksgiving and shot up everyone. We have to understand that this is a real issue across the board in this country that we want to relegate at the hand of the oppressed. But the reality is we know that ain't true. Now, to the heart of it, when we're talking about skill sets, what we're talking about is, first again, remember I said, what we have in common is that, academically speaking, if I use it as its own vernacular now, we both had good teachers. I tell people all the time, my first grade teacher was my mother and my father.
There you go.
Because at the end of the day, before the teacher taught me my colors, my mother and father told me my color was okay.
Yes.
Before my teachers taught me math, 2 plus 2 is 4, my parents taught me how to add up the importance of values as associated with academic grades, right?
Yes, yes.
And so what I'm simply saying to you is quite simply, our children in education, we have to define, which is what Black Academically Speaking is doing. We need to define what is education, which is why we say if it's education without excellence, that ain't education to us.
That's right.
That's not what we're talking about. When we're talking about curriculums, if they're minus character development and cultural significance, we don't need that curriculum. When you have a curriculum that synonymously empowers a child, build their esteem, ensuring that their identity is significant, what I've learned is a child would want to learn. Let me give you an example. I've gone into schools, some of the roughest schools in some of the roughest communities in some of the roughest cities. And I've sat there, and many people throw me in the room and they say, okay, we got about 500 freshmen. Dr. Gill was down in Georgia, and they said we got about 500 freshman girls. It's very tough down here, such and so. And I guess their response to mine was, maybe you don't understand what we're about to do here. I said, no, I'm fine. They said, no, these girls, they're tough, and it's that they're coming in stuff. I'm fine. And I've heard many people say after I'm done, well, we can hear a pin drop. Wow. And what I tell people all the time is, when I walk into the school and when I walk into any assembly that they've hired me for or consulting with a district, I first come with one belief. At the end of it all, if you want what I got, you got to sit here and hear it. But I also understand that I'm not going to change them in that moment. They've been victims of the very system that we're talking about.
Yep.
So what I have to do is say, as a victim of this system, I understand that you may chit-chat a little bit when I start, but my goal is to have you listening when I end. And I'm not trying to alter what you do. I'm trying to alter the mindset behind what you do. By example, I'm not going to tell you, brother, to please pull up your pants. I'm going to change your mindset and you can pull them up on your own. Because if I change the way you think about yourself, you ain't going to have them down anyway.
That's right.
So at the end of it all, it's a value system. And so back to the skill set as associated with everything I just stated, academically speaking, what we believe, bottom line is, if you empower a child, they will want to do math. If you empower a child, they will want to do science. What's wrong today is not that our children lack the skill set alone. They lack the faith in themselves to perform it. They lack a connection to where it's taking them. They don't understand how we build pyramids, and today we throw up the rock as a pyramid. They don't understand how we gave the world math, and today we equate math to dollar signs. So we have to come in and we have to flush through the madness and say, listen, this is the truth. We have to connect identity and we have to connect cultural significance to mathematics. When we fail to do that, we get a teacher that can teach math but can't teach math to Leroy. That's not what we need here. And that's what's missing today. You know the real problem. And so how do you deal with all of your knowledge and all of your wisdom and all of your information and knowing that our children are being run through places called schools like cattle and not getting what they need? So you have to deal with the socioeconomic piece. You have to deal with the love for people piece. And then you got to deal with the piece that we want to ignore too often. The parents that are not as engaged as they possibly could be, looking at how poverty has impacted the lives of our parents and teachers and children, looking at our communities. That's loaded. We're brilliant and resilient. I like to use this opportunity to go into my first book that I wrote, Champions Break Chains. And people say, well, what made you say champions break chains? I said, because it took the champion in Harriet. We minimized that. We diluted that struggle. She left her man. She left her husband. Let's be very clear on that. We watered down the truth of what our ancestors did. We're saying, wait a minute. We've come a long way, and we've done much. But the truth of the matter is, what we're empowered by is realizing that our children have that same spirit. Why do champions break chains? Because you cannot lack courage and think you're going to come out of the chains. We left slavery, but slavery never left us.
Now, there's a profound statement. Slavery never left us, and that is so true. And
It didn't, and you're seeing it every day. You're
yeah,
seeing it every day, aren't you?
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I certainly do. You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the
Yeah.
choir, sister. I know what you're talking about. Believe me.
Indeed.
You're quoted as saying it takes a village to raise a child. But who's the village? If you could please explain what you meant by this statement.
Here's what I believe. I believe that we're always quoting at it African proverbs. We're all sounding very deep and provocative, right?
Yeah,
So it takes a village to raise a child, but at some point we have to define success. What is success today? Sometimes we have to define education. What is education today? As I just distinctly suggested what Dr. Shuja stated in his work, too much schooling, too little education. They're not one and the same. And at some point, we have to define the village. When I was a professor at the university, before I left to build my company, I used to tell my students, you know, you have to be careful because everybody who looks like you ain't for you. So
true.
just because we in the village, just because we live by each other, that don't mean you have my child's best interest at heart. And so when we're talking about the village, we have to deal with who's really standing up for our children today. I've asked people in professional teachers in professional development sessions, by show of hands, who do you know on a national level that is the main advocate for black children? Who's unapologetically standing up for black children? Who's unapologetically saying, you're not going to have my 8th grade boy and my 9th grade girl at the 3rd grade level talking about they're about to go to high school? And overwhelmingly, people look at each other, my colleagues, and I say, that's what Black academically speaking is here for. We want to define the village. We're voluntarily saying we're responsible for black children. We're not going to wait on anybody to teach them. We're taking full responsibility, and we have no problem identifying when something is out of alignment with the village. No, it is not okay for you to railroad our children and create a whole conference around school to prison pipeline. Why do we accept this truth? Why is it okay to create a school to prison pipeline discourse and not a school to prison pipeline solution? Why do schools look like prisons? Let's ask some real questions. You know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
when we get to the heart of that, we have to say, okay, who's the village? And that's what I dare to delve into in my book, because we have to show our children. They need to see the example. They need to see the black man stand up and be a black man and be a father. They need to see that even if your father's not present, there's a mentor waiting on you to get you to where you need to be. That's the village. So it's not enough to just say it takes a village if you're not willing to be a part of it.
We have been speaking with Dr. Chandra Gill, and she's an educator as well as a motivator, and she's the founder of Black Academically Speaking, and she has so graciously given us some of her very valuable time today, and we certainly appreciate it, Dr. Gill. In closing, please feel free to plug anything or any project, your website, that you may deem appropriate and necessary.
Academically speaking, and my closing point is very simple. Why can't black children become doctors and diagnose ailments and solutions to those ailments and cures? Why can't they be Charles Drew again, George Washington Carver? W.E.B. said in 1903, the problem of America's problem is the problem of the color line. He prophetically assessed where we would be. And the truth is, we're going into beyond the 20th century, the 21st century, 22nd century. We come from a gifted people who prophetically knew where we would be. Why can our children answer stand in that ancestral truth? And so Justice Supreme Court Justice Scalia is wrong when he say most of the black scientists in this country do not come from most advanced schools and not giving the reality of why we've not been allowed to the schools. And so what we're going to do, Black Academically Speaking, continue to do throughout the country with school districts, principals, teachers, students. They can give us a call, 855-651-3337, 855-651-3337. We want to be where they are. We believe in black children. You can definitely hit me up on Facebook, Dr. Chandra Gill, Black Academically Speaking, my website, drchandragill.com, and of course my Twitter handle, Instagram is drgill5. So I thank you so much. We're here to do one thing, and that is to motivate and educate collectively our children. We believe in our brilliance and our resilience, and we will only accept as excellence as an educational value for our community.